Wonderful to have this nice snowy Sunday. We are going to do a quick review of the Great Depression. Get the Great Depression started, we really need to go back to World War One. The United States decides to get involved in that war in 1917, and it ends in 1918. The Allies are successful, and farmers benefit from this. Not only do farmers have to feed the people at home and the troops overseas, but after the war, because of the devastation of World War One, for a few years, the farmers are going to continue to feed Europe. Thus, they're purchasing more land, more farming equipment, and that is really about to get farmers in trouble in 1920. As you can see, there's a huge decline in prices right about 1920 into 1921. And it's because Europe doesn't need our help anymore. And farmers had borrowed so much, to create all that extra food that they have these huge bills to pay. So they keep producing more food and buying more tractors, and they're just getting themselves more and more in debt. And many economists say this was the start of the Great Depression. You guys are smart enough to know that the Great Depression doesn't start in 1920 or 1921. Really, the official date is Black Tuesday in October of 1929 when the stock market collapses. There was a hint of it the week before, but on Tuesday, the value of stocks, which we spoke about in class, seriously declined because a lot of people were trying to sell, and if nobody's willing to buy, it continues to push the stock prices down. Literally, people had lost almost everything on that day because remember, some people had their life investments in the stock because people were speculating. Remember, we defined that word in class. It was about speculating that the price of stocks was going to continue to increase, that land values were going to continue to increase. That speculation is it's a guess, it's a game. You think because the trend continues that it will always be that way, and obviously it was not. President Hoover has been decided by many that he's one of the top 10 worst presidents ever to serve this country, and it's just not true. The stock market collapse takes place 8 months after he takes the oath of office. Can't really blame him for that, although, we do that as Americans. We blame who's at the top. Remember, he had a different philosophy than FDR. He believed in volunteerism. He thought that some organizations outside the government should loan money to banks and should come to businesses help. So remember, that philosophy was called laissez-faire. Oftentimes, the Regents exam wants you to regurgitate, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? He was one that believed in hard work, that the harder you work, that you could pull yourself out of these situations. He also used the phrase individual ruggedism. Nah, I'm just kidding. Rugged individualism. He used that term also to say, hey, be tough. So he did create agencies, but it was very much an indirect route to try and help the Great Depression. And as it got worse and worse as we get towards the election in 1932, people are really calling for direct intervention from the government, and that just wasn't his philosophy. So it wasn't just farmers that were in trouble. A lot of businesses were. People, started slowing down their purchasing in the 1920s. Remember, they were installment buying, buying on credit, and people were starting to lose their jobs, and they weren't purchasing as many goods. But businesses kept producing, which started to force the prices of what they could sell down. Thus, they had to produce even more to try and cover their costs. It was a bad circle that businesses were putting themselves in. And this overproduction and underconsumption was also a cause of the Great Depression. That installment buying, people buying on credit, or speculating or margin buying in the stock market started it. So then, also during the Hoover administration, the Great Dust Bowl begins. Remember, it was in the Great Plains, and the farmers had been destroying that top layer of topsoil and grasses that held the topsoil down. So when the incredible drought started and the wind started, the Dust Bowl, destroys farmers even more. And remember, the dust storm got all the way to the east coast of the United States, so more problems for Hoover. So then in 1931, World War I vets who were promised a bonus in 1945 for serving decided that the Great Depression had become so bad that they were going to march on Washington, a peaceful march on Washington. Men with their families had come from all over the United States to ask for that bonus. Now, of course, President Hoover can't just hand that out. It's got to have congressional approval because the House of Representatives has the power of the purse. And the Congress, because their lack of money, also says no. So at that point, President Hoover asked the police to come in and remove them from the shanty town, or really what is considered a Hooverville in Washington. The police come in, there's some violence. Some policemen are hurt, so then the president orders the troops in, and the troops burn the shanty town, and a couple of the World War I vets are killed. So we also have the election of 1932, and in Nick DeRose's words, FDR destroyed Hoover. So apparently the people of the United States, or most of them anyways, were tired of Hoover and wanted government intervention, and that's what FDR would do.
Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George. I've never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run. Now, just remember that this thing isn't as black as it appears. I have some news for you, folks. I was just talking to old man Potter, and he's guaranteed cash payments to the bank. The bank's going to reopen next week.
But, George, I got my money here. He didn't guarantee this place.
Well, no, Charlie, I didn't even ask him. We don't need Potter over here.
And I'll take mine now.
No, but you're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
I got $242 in here, and $242 isn't going to break anybody.
Okay, Tom. All right. Here you are. You sign this. You get your money in 60 days.
60 days?
Well, now, that's what you agreed to when you bought your shares.
Tom, did you get your money?
No.
Well, I did. Old man Potter will pay 50 cents on the dollar for every share you got. 50 cents. Yes, cash.
Well, what do you say?
Oh, Tom, you have to stick to your original agreement. Now, give us 60 days on this thing.
Okay, Randall.
Are you going to Potter's?
Better to get half than nothing.
Randall, wait. Now, listen. Now, listen to me. I beg of you not to do this thing. If Potter gets a hold of this building and alone, there'll never be another decent house built in this town. He's already got charge of the bank, he's got the bus line, he's got the department stores, and now he's after us. Why? Well, it's very simple. Because we're cutting in on his business, that's why. Because he wants to keep you living in his slums and paying the kind of rent he decides. Joe, you had one of those Potter houses, didn't you? Well, have you forgotten? Have you forgotten what he charged you for that broken-down shack? Here, Ed, you remember last year when things weren't going so well and you couldn't make your payments? Well, you didn't lose your house, did you? You think Potter would have let you keep it? Can't you understand what's happening here? Don't you see what's happening? Potter isn't selling, Potter's buying. And why? Because we're panicky and he's not. That's why. He's picking up some bargain. Now, we can get through this thing all right. We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
But my husband hasn't worked in over a year, and I need money. How am I going to live until the bank opens?
I got doctor bills to pay. I need cash.
I can't keep bargains on faith. I've got to have...
How much do you need?
Hey! I got $2,000. Here's $2,000. This will tide us over to the bank reopens. All right, Tom, how much do you need?
$242.
No, Tom, just enough to to tide you over until the bank.
I'll take $242.
There you are.
That'll close my account.
Your account's still here. That's a loan. Okay. All right, Ed.
Well, I got $300 here, George.
All right, now, Ed, what'll it take to pull the bank open? What do you need?
Well, I suppose $20.
$20. Now you're talking. Thanks, Ed. That's fine. All right, now, Miss Thompson, how much do you want?
But it's your own money,
Now,
George.
never mind about that. How much do you want now?
I can get along with 20, all right.
$20.
And I'll sign the paper.
You don't have to sign anything. I know you. You pay it when you can. That's okay. All right, Miss Davis.
Could I have 1750?
Sure, Horn. Of course you can have it. You got 50 cents. 7.
We're going to make it, George.
6.
They'll never close us up today.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bingo! We made it. Close the door, Houston. We made it. Look, we're still in business. We still got $2 left. Well, look, let's have some of that.
So as FDR wins the election, he almost immediately signs the executive order to the bank holiday. So he closed the banks. And then he did one of his fireside chats, which we also explained in class, how he was speaking on the radio to the American people. And he did that throughout his presidency. So he closed the banks really to stop the bank runs, which you guys just watched, from them closing. He wanted to ensure confidence in the banks, and he explained that he was going to check on banks and make sure that they had money. Banks would still close. They would close all the way through the 1930s, but it did slow down their closing. So simply by Roosevelt giving himself control of the bank, well, Congress gave him control, it does install some confidence. Now, this is unprecedented. Most times our government was laissez-faire in the economy. This time, Roosevelt now is able to control a certain industry of the country, and he's going to have even more control as we go on. This will completely change the direction of the United States. The government will always be involved in the economy, sometimes more than less, but really completely changes it. I wonder what the direction of this country would have been if maybe Hoover would have won again. Maybe better, maybe worse. At the height of the Great Depression, unemployment reached around 25%. Some places it was worse, in some places it was less. You can compare that to the Great Recession of 2008, where really unemployment reached about 10%. So this is a huge problem that President Roosevelt is going to have to deal with right away. So Roosevelt creates the New Deal. And the first 100 days in office, he passes much legislation. And he's able to do so because during that 32 election, many Democrats won in both the House and the Senate, giving him a control, really, in both of those houses. So he is able to pass such things as the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, the SEC, which is going to overlook the stock market to make sure that the speculation doesn't happen again. The CCC, the Conservation Corps, which was putting young guys to work out in the country. They took them from the cities, put them out in the country to build parks and campgrounds and all of that stuff that they were going to do. Too much to list here. It's a really cool organization. If you guys are interested in getting learned some more, you want to read about the CCC. In fact, they operated right here in Broome County. But I guess the biggest point of this was he had a plan, this New Deal. It was relief, recovery, and reform. Okay, so relief was going to try and put money in people's pockets right away. Recovery was to slowly but surely fix the economy, and reform was going to be so that this never really happens again. And I've said often in class that we've had greater stock market collapses after the Great Depression, but because of things that FDR did, we haven't seen a Great Depression like what people experienced in the 30s. Relief, recovery, reform. Know it, love it, regurgitate it on the Regents, folks. The other new program that Roosevelt creates is the Social Security Administration. The point of this was to remove the elderly, or what were considered elderly at the time anyways, out of the workforce. They were going to collect a certain amount of money, and thus they wouldn't have to rely on their family or work until they die, which many people were. Today we still have Social Security around, and it is a benefit. Some people call it a safety net, so that people can depend upon retirement. But remember, the point of this is to remove the elderly workforce so that some of the younger men and women could enter the workforce, because he wants to put money in people's hands. So the Social Security Act is going to do that for the elderly, and then if people are able to take the jobs that they held, that puts money in their hands. Now, there were strikes that went on during World War II, and of course, Roosevelt did not want that to happen. So he was able to pass some acts, the NIRA, in order to control wages and prices. And of course, many workers did not like that. Workers wanted to control their own wages, right? They wanted to collectively bargain with management. So the NIRA is eventually found to be unconstitutional. The Wagner Act is passed, and that is going to allow workers to collectively bargain with management for wages, working conditions, and hours. Roosevelt truly believed that if he could control wages and control prices of goods being sold, that he could help the economy. Now, this is where some people started to say, okay, this might be going a little bit too far. And eventually, Roosevelt will truly have to fight for many of his pieces of legislation to get passed. Towards the end of the Great Depression, he actually kind of has a fight with both Congress and the Supreme Court. One of the organizations that FDR creates is the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. And really what that did is it gave him power over business again. And it was going to be electricity. And this way he was going to be able to control rates and wages and things like that. Now, that's already gotten him in trouble, and this is where people think that FDR has gone too far. So the TVA will also be declared unconstitutional. So FDR comes up with a scheme. I'm going to call it a scheme, because the Supreme Court keeps voting many of his business administrations unconstitutional. He decides he wants congressional approval to add more members to the Supreme Court. Of course, if the president can appoint those Supreme Court members, he almost always is going to find people that believe in his values. So people across the country, not everybody, believe that Roosevelt is going well beyond his powers that were written in the Constitution. So this is known as the court packing scheme, and eventually Congress will say no to this court packing. So I would just want to HYU some more information about the Great Depression. That's right, hit you up. That's right, I'm cool. Hey, sometimes the New Deal is referred to as alphabet soup. And if you think about it, you can see why. The SEC, the TVA, the CCC, the WPA, the NRA, I could go on, you guys. But you do have to refer to it as that. Anyways, the New Deal definitely helped people out during the Great Depression. I can't really say that it got us out of it, though. Okay? If you look historically, unemployment numbers do start to creep down. But let's be honest, what really gets us out of the Great Depression is, World War II.